Some families protect their secrets with money. Others protect them with fear. The Harringtons used both, and tonight, on my 35th birthday, they would finally make their move. From the outside, the story was perfect. James Harrington, heir to an old New England fortune. Elise Harrington, his polished, accomplished wife. 5 years of marriage, no scandals, no cracks. A rooftop restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor, filled with powerful people who smiled easily because they had nothing to lose. But this story was never about love. It was about control. And it was about to turn violent. The rooftop shimmered with glass, chandeliers, and quiet arrogance. Crystal flutes clinked. Laughter floated between tables like rehearsed lines in a play everyone already knew by heart. Senators, judges, donors, and business leaders filled the space, people who mattered, people who protected one another. People who believed the Harrington name was untouchable. Victoria Harrington stood at the center of it all. 62, flawless, commanding, she wore midnight blue and certainty. Nothing in this city happened without brushing against her approval. She smiled at me like a proud mother, but her eyes never softened. They measured, they owned. James stood beside me, his hand resting at my back. Once that touch meant safety. Now it felt like placement, like a reminder. He looked perfect in his tailored suit, handsome, composed, empty. The man I married had been slowly disappearing for years, replaced by someone quieter, obedient, distant. Tonight, whatever remained of him was being tested. Victoria leaned toward him as guests laughed and cameras flashed. I didn't hear the words at first. I only saw the change. James stiffened. His jaw tightened. His pupils shrank. The warmth vanished from his face as if someone had turned off a switch. I recognized the pattern. I had seen it too many times before, after family meetings, after private conversations, after whispers I was never meant to hear. I turned toward him. James. He didn't look at me. The air shifted. Conversations faded. Something sharp moved beneath the music and champagne. Victoria stepped back, satisfied, her expression calm as ever. James turned. His eyes were empty. "You betrayed us," he said, his voice flat, unfamiliar. Before I could speak, before I could even understand what accusation he believed, his arm moved. The sound was loud, wrong too real. My world tilted as pain exploded across my face. The floor rushed up to meet me. Crystal glasses rattled. Someone gasped. Someone laughed nervously, unsure if this was real or some private family moment gone too far. I lay there stunned, my cheek pressed against cold stone, the taste of blood filling my mouth. No one moved. James stared at his hand like it didn't belong to him. Victoria inhaled, already preparing the story she would tell next. The guests stood frozen, phones raised, recording everything. For 3 heartbeats, the Harrington empire held its breath. Then I laughed. It slipped out quietly at first, soft, broken, but it grew. Clear, steady, uncontrolled. James froze. Victoria's smile vanished. Because that laugh wasn't hysteria. It was timing. And as I pushed myself up from the floor, blood on my lip and cameras watching, I knew the trap they had planned for me had already failed. This wasn't my public ending. It was theirs. The laugh stayed with me, even after the pain settled. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed everything I already knew. The morning had started quietly, too quietly. I woke before James, before the city, before the lies of the day began. Dawn leaked through the curtains he had chosen, the ones his mother approved of, the ones that reminded me every morning whose house this really was. I didn't move. I reached for my laptop instead. The email had arrived at 5:42 a.m. No greeting, no apology, just facts. Harrington Trust disbursement conditions, asterisk. Continuous marital status of no less than 5 years. No separation filings. No divorce proceedings. 5 years. Today was our 5th anniversary. My fingers trembled, not from shock, but from confirmation. I had suspected this for months. The timing, the pressure, Victoria's sudden interest in my birthday, the insistence on a public celebration filled with witnesses. They needed the marriage intact. They needed me silent. And after tonight, they planned to remove me. I forwarded the email to my encrypted server without hesitation. The final document slid into place. Every transfer, every recording, every pattern I'd tracked for years now had motive attached to it. James emerged from the bathroom minutes later, towel around his waist, steam trailing behind him. He looked at me and smiled. "Happy birthday, Elise." The words sounded practiced. I smiled back, "Thank you." He kissed my cheek. His lips were warm, his eyes were not. "Mother's excited about tonight," he said. "She wants everything perfect." Perfect meant controlled, perfect meant obedient, perfect meant no surprises. "What are you working on?" he asked, glancing at my laptop. "Merger documents," I said smoothly. "Even birthday girls don't get the day off." He accepted the answer without question. That was new. The James I married would have teased me, argued, pulled me back into bed. That man was gone. When he left for the family office, I went to the only room without cameras, the walk-in closet. I pressed a hidden seam in the wall. The panel slid open. Inside were hard drives, a burner phone, and a backup laptop. 4 years of evidence. 4 years of pretending. 4 years of smiling beside people I was quietly destroying. Bank transfers, shell companies, bribes, psychological manipulation, videos of family meetings they never thought anyone else would see. At the top of the newest folder was a photograph taken the day before. Victoria Harrington entering her Back Bay home. With Thomas Whitley, James's childhood therapist. The man paid $30,000 a month for behavioral maintenance. I checked the time, 7:15 a.m. I closed the panel and became Elise Harrington again, calm, polished, devoted. By noon, I stood on the courthouse steps, my real work done for the day. My phone buzzed. SEC contact *. Received, moving next week. Need anything else? I typed one line. Me *1 final piece, tonight. As the city moved around me, unaware of what was coming, I realized something simple and terrifying. The Harringtons thought tonight was about securing their future. They never considered I had already secured mine. By the time evening arrived, I understood the truth clearly. I wasn't a wife living in a marriage. I was a variable in a system. The Harrington house looked peaceful from the outside, Beacon Hill elegance, old money restraint. Inside, every corner watched. I had discovered the cameras 3 months earlier during a sleepless night. Not hidden carelessly, installed with precision. Bedroom, hallway, study, even the living room. Victoria called it security. It was surveillance. I hadn't disabled them. That would raise suspicion. Instead, I fed them loops, harmless footage of routine days. When I needed privacy, I stepped into the closet. The only blind spot, the only place I still belonged to myself. James never noticed the cameras, or maybe he had been trained not to. That was the most disturbing part, how normal everything felt once you stopped questioning it. Dinner conversations were polite, predictable. If I disagreed too strongly, James would go quiet. If I pushed, he'd become cold. Sometimes later that night, he wouldn't remember the argument at all. At first, I thought it was stress. Then I started tracking patterns. Every behavioral shift followed a family meeting. Every hesitation followed a call from his mother. Every emotional response arrived seconds late, as if filtered. James didn't choose anymore, he reacted. I tested it carefully, small disagreements. Slight changes in routine, every time the same result, a correction, a withdrawal, a reset. Someone had rewritten him. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The files in my hidden drives told the rest of the story. Subsidiaries that shouldn't exist. Funds moving in circles, donations returning as profits. The Harrington fortune wasn't just inherited, it was engineered. And James was the key. He signed what they needed, approved what they wanted, smiled when required. He didn't ask why because asking had consequences. I remembered moments that hadn't made sense before, headaches after family dinners, long silences, nights he stared at nothing. I remembered Victoria's hand on his shoulder, always in the same place, always a little too firm. Control didn't need force when conditioning worked. That's when I understood why they hadn't pushed me out sooner. They were waiting. 5 years. A clean record. No separation. And then, removal. Tonight wasn't a party. It was a transition, one final adjustment to the system. Either I complied or I disappeared quietly. As the car took us toward the harbor, James checked his watch for the 4th time in 10 minutes. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded too quickly. "Mother wants this to go smoothly." Smoothly? That word again. I touched the phone in my clutch. The device was ready, recording armed, location tracked, dead man protocol active. They believed they were controlling the room. They didn't realize they were walking into evidence. When the car stopped and the doors opened to flashing lights and smiling faces, James offered his arm. I took it. Not because I needed support, but because I wanted to feel exactly how tight his grip had become. I noticed him the moment we stepped onto the rooftop. Not because he stood out, but because he didn't. Silver hair, neutral suit, calm posture. A man trained to observe without being seen. He wasn't laughing like the others. He wasn't drinking. He was watching James. And James knew him. I saw it in the delay before recognition, in the tightening around his eyes. A reaction that came from somewhere older than memory. "That's Dr. Whitley," James said quietly when he followed my gaze. "From when you were a child?" I asked. He nodded. "My therapist. Mother insisted I say hello if he came." Insisted. We hadn't taken 3 steps before William Harrington intercepted the man, guiding him away from the crowd. Their heads bent together. Their voices dropped. I didn't need to hear the words to understand the urgency. I moved closer under the excuse of greeting another guest. "Timeline's collapsing," William said. "Trust won't extend again," Whitley replied. "Conditioning needs reinforcement." Reinforcement. The word landed hard. They noticed me then. Smiles snapped into place like masks. "Elise," Whitley said, offering his hand. His grip was brief, clinical. "Happy birthday." "Thank you, doctor," I said. "James talks about you sometimes." A lie, but his eyes flickered anyway. "James was a remarkable subject," he said carefully. "Very responsive." Subject? I glanced at James. He stood rigid, hands clasped in front of him, eyes fixed on the floor, like a child waiting for instructions. "How long have you been advising the family?" I asked lightly. Whitley hesitated, just a fraction. "On and off, the Harringtons value continuity." I smiled. "Of course they do." As we moved away, my phone vibrated once in my clutch. A silent confirmation, audio recording active, every word captured. James exhaled sharply once we were out of earshot. "I hate seeing him," he muttered. "Why?" I asked. He rubbed his temple. "I don't know, I just feel wrong afterward." That was all the confirmation I needed. Throughout the evening, Whitley tracked James with subtle precision. A glance here, a note typed there. Each interaction measured, logged, corrected. This wasn't therapy. It was maintenance. I remembered a document buried deep in the financial records, a recurring expense coded under a shell company. Behavioral maintenance, $30,000 month. No invoice details, no justification, just consistency. The man standing 20 feet away was the reason. Victoria joined Whitley near the edge of the terrace. She leaned in close, her voice too low for anyone else to hear. I watched James as she spoke. His shoulders stiffened. His breathing changed. His fingers twitched once, then went still. Whatever she said, it wasn't meant for Whitley. It was meant for James. I checked my phone again. Recording. Location live. Trigger ready. They weren't hiding anymore, they were accelerating. Which meant they were afraid. And fear, in people who believe they control everything, always leads to mistakes. Tonight, the therapist wasn't here to observe. He was here to activate. I didn't start investigating the Harringtons because I was suspicious. I started because I was trained to notice patterns. Numbers that didn't align, documents that arrived late, decisions James approved without remembering why. At first, I treated it like any other case, quietly, professionally, without emotion. That was my first mistake. Because this wasn't corporate fraud alone. It was personal. The first burner phone came from a convenience store 2 towns away. Cash, no receipt. The second came a month later. By the third, I stopped pretending this was temporary. I built a system. Encrypted drives, offline backups, redundancies stacked on redundancies. If one file vanished, 3 more would surface somewhere else. If anything happened to me, everything would release. James never noticed. That was the most dangerous part. How easy it was to hide in plain sight when people believed they already owned you. By day, I defended corporations at one of Boston's most powerful firms. By night, I dismantled one from the inside. The irony never escaped me. Every skill I used to protect powerful clients now worked against my own family. I tracked money first. Offshore accounts tied to charities. Shell companies paying shell companies. Profits disguised as donations. A loop designed to look generous while draining everything beneath it. Then I tracked people. Executives who left suddenly. Board members who stopped asking questions. A senator who changed his vote after a private dinner at Victoria's home. And always James. The more I watched, the clearer it became. He wasn't leading anything. He was authorizing it. A signature, a nod, a smile at the right time. He was the clean face, the acceptable heir, the proof that the Harrington Empire was stable, ethical, untouchable. That's when I realized why they chose me. I was credible, controlled, replaceable. A successful wife made the image complete. A lawyer who asked no questions in public. A woman who smiled while quietly being erased. I could have left. That option appeared early, during the second year, when James forgot an entire weekend we spent together. During the third, when he didn't remember telling me he loved me. During the fourth, when he stopped arguing altogether. But leaving would have made me invisible. Staying made me dangerous. So I stayed. I recorded meetings, copied emails, documented behavior, every whisper, every shift in James's expression after Victoria spoke to him alone, every time he repeated words that didn't sound like his own. I wasn't gathering leverage. I was building a case. Tonight was proof they knew it. The therapist, the guest list, the timing, the 5-year mark, the whisper. They believed they were exposing me. What they didn't know was that every move they made only added clarity. I touched the phone in my clutch again. This wasn't revenge. It was completion. And once the first crack appeared, everything they built would collapse faster than they could stop it. Victoria Harrington didn't raise her voice. She never had to. Power followed her naturally, into rooms, into conversations, into decisions she never officially made. Men twice her size waited for her approval. Women twice her age copied her tone. Judges returned her calls. Politicians remembered her birthdays. She called it influence. I called it ownership. Every important connection in the city traced back to her somehow. Charities, universities, foundations, favors stacked over decades like quiet debt. If someone rose too fast, she helped. If someone fell, she decided whether they stood back up. James was her greatest asset. After his father died, Victoria rewrote the rules. Grief made James malleable. Fear made him obedient. She wrapped control in concern and called it love. Special programs, special guidance, a therapist who never left the picture. Whitley. Once I knew what to look for, the structure was obvious. James wasn't raised, he was managed. Every choice filtered. Every impulse corrected. Independence treated like illness. And I was added later to stabilize the system. A wife with credibility, a career that impressed donors, a calm presence that reassured investors. I wasn't chosen for love, I was selected for function. Tonight confirmed it. Victoria watched me constantly, even when she pretended not to. Every laugh, every step, every glance toward James. When he stood too close to me, she intervened. When he drifted, she redirected him. I saw her whisper to him again near the bar. 3 words. That was all it took. James's posture changed instantly. The therapist noticed too. He typed something into his phone and slipped it into his pocket. Adjustment logged. I felt it then, a certainty settling in my chest. They were preparing James to act. Not emotionally, not impulsively. Precisely. The whisper wasn't a warning. It was an instruction. And whatever came next wasn't meant to be private. Victoria wanted witnesses, cameras, a clean narrative shaped before the truth could escape. She didn't fear scandal, she controlled it. What she didn't understand was timing. She believed I was cornered. But every step she took tonight aligned perfectly with the evidence I needed. The therapist, the public trigger, the physical response, the documentation. They were exposing themselves. I met Victoria's eyes across the terrace. She smiled. Confident, certain, victorious. She thought she had already won. That's the danger with empires built on obedience. They forget what happens when someone refuses to respond the way they were trained to. It didn't take long to notice who wasn't there. No one from my law firm. No friends from Harvard. No colleagues who knew me before the Harrington name replaced my own. Every guest had one thing in common: they owed Victoria. Judges who ruled favorably, politicians who received donations, business leaders whose failures were quietly erased, people who would believe her version of events without hesitation. The room was controlled. I was the variable. Victoria moved through the crowd with practiced ease, introducing me like an acquisition. Her hand lingered on my arm just long enough to remind me who curated this night. Everyone important is here, she said, her smile sharp. Important to her. I scanned the faces, matching them to my files. Every connection already mapped. Every loyalty already documented. This wasn't a celebration, it was containment. William approached with champagne. You're not drinking. Not tonight, I said. His eyes flicked to my glass, then to Victoria. A silent note taken. At the edge of the terrace, Whitley stood alone, watching James. When James laughed too freely, Whitley's expression tightened. When James fell silent, he relaxed. Monitoring. James leaned toward me. Mother says we should stay close tonight. Of course she did. Are you nervous? I asked. He hesitated. I don't know why, I just feel like something's supposed to happen. It already had. I felt it in the room, in the spacing of the tables, in the way exits were casually blocked by waitstaff, in the positioning of certain guests near the center. Witnesses placed carefully. Exits discouraged. Narrative pre-written. Victoria wanted control over what would be remembered. She tapped her glass. Silence spread instantly. Dinner, she announced. Let's all take our seats. Seating wasn't random. James was placed beside me, Whitley directly across, Victoria at the head, William nearby. A closed loop. As plates arrived, Victoria leaned in behind my chair, her fingers resting lightly on my shoulders. The gesture looked affectionate. It wasn't. Such a special night, she murmured, and afterward something important to discuss. Important meant irreversible. James's knee bounced beneath the table, a rhythmic motion, controlled, familiar. I slipped my phone from my clutch beneath the table. Recording live. Whatever they intended to do to me tonight, they were about to do it in front of everyone who mattered. And that was exactly what I needed. The food arrived. No one tasted it. Dinner was only a pause, an intermission before the real performance. Conversations stayed light, controlled, rehearsed. Laughter rose at the right moments. Glasses refilled before they emptied. Victoria watched everything. James barely spoke. His fork moved mechanically, his eyes fixed on his plate. Every time Victoria cleared her throat, his shoulders stiffened. Whitley observed in silence, fingers steepled, eyes tracking microreactions. When James shifted in his seat, Whitley made a note. When James exhaled too sharply, another note. I felt the trap tightening. William leaned toward Whitley across the table. I caught fragments between the clink of silverware. The date won't move. Needs a decisive break. Witnesses are essential. A decisive break. I looked at Victoria. She nodded once, barely perceptible. James's hand stopped moving. His breathing slowed. I had seen this before, at home, after meetings, after discussions I wasn't invited into. Activation. Victoria lifted her glass again. Before dessert, she said, we'll do gifts, something meaningful. Her eyes met mine. The word meaningful wasn't a promise, it was a warning. James leaned closer to me, his voice was flat. If you've been hiding anything, now would be the time to say it. I searched his face for the man I married. There was nothing there, just obedience waiting for instruction. I haven't hidden anything, I said. That was true. Everything was already exposed, just not to them yet. As plates were cleared, waitstaff wheeled in a display of wrapped gifts. Cameras rose, phones unlocked. Victoria ensured the room's attention stayed fixed on me. This wasn't generosity. It was theater. Whitley typed something quickly and slid his phone away. James's fingers twitched once. I felt it then, the final alignment. The whisper would come soon. The response would follow. And the room would remember exactly what Victoria wanted them to remember. Unless I changed the story. I pressed my thumb lightly against my phone. Armed. Live. Waiting, Victoria stood slowly, glass raised. The room obeyed her before she spoke. 5 years ago, she began, my son brought Elise into our family. Applause followed, automatic, polite. She was intelligent, ambitious, discreet. Her eyes met mine, everything we value. James sat rigid beside me, his jaw was locked, his knee bounced once, then stopped. Marriage, Victoria continued, requires loyalty, trust, and sacrifice. She emphasized the last word. I felt it then, the timing lining up perfectly. 5 years, 1 night, 50 witnesses. Victoria stepped closer to James, her hand resting on his shoulder. Her fingers pressed in a precise place. I had seen that gesture before. I had documented it. She leaned down. No microphone. No recording equipment. Just a whisper meant for him. Do your duties. James inhaled sharply. Something in him shifted. I watched it happen, the blankness settling in, the hesitation erased. Victoria straightened, smiling at the guests. To family, she said, and to truth. The room echoed her toast. James turned to face me. You betrayed us, he said. The words weren't angry, they were delivered, like lines he had practiced. What are you talking about? I asked calmly. We know about the files, he continued. The investigation, the outside contacts. Gasps rippled through the table. Victoria stepped back, giving him space, like a director clearing the stage. James stood. His eyes didn't recognize me. You were supposed to protect this family, he said. And then his hand moved. The sound was sharp, final, loud enough to silence the harbor. Pain exploded across my face. I stumbled, hit the edge of the table, then the floor. The world blurred, my mouth filled with blood. No one moved. James stared at his hand, confusion flickering beneath the surface. His breathing went shallow, something inside him fractured. Victoria opened her mouth, ready to explain, to redirect, to frame the narrative. I didn't let her. I laughed. The sound cut through the silence like glass. James froze. Victoria's face tightened. I pushed myself upright, wiping blood from my lip with a napkin. Cameras were everywhere now. No one looked away. You really couldn't help yourselves, I said softly. Could you? Victoria hissed, Elise, stop this. I didn't look at her, I looked at the room. At least you all recorded it, I said. That was important. Phones buzzed, news alerts flashed, confusion spread. James whispered, what did I just do? I met his eyes. Exactly what they trained you to, I said. Victoria stepped forward. This woman is unstable. No, I interrupted. This woman is finished being quiet. I reached into my clutch. And so are you. The room didn't explode into chaos the way Victoria expected. It froze. 50 people stood perfectly still, phones raised, eyes darting between me and James. No one rushed forward. No one defended him. Power had taught them caution first. James staggered back a step, staring at his hand like it belonged to someone else. I didn't, his voice cracked. I didn't mean. You weren't meant to, I said calmly. You were triggered. Victoria moved fast, too fast. She placed herself between James and the crowd, one hand gripping his arm, the other raised in practiced concern. My son is under extreme stress, she announced. This woman has been manipulating him for months. I smiled, blood still clung to my lip. Check your phones, I said. The first alert chimed. Then another. Then another. Whispers spread as headlines loaded. HARRNGTON family under federal investigation. Allegations of fraud and psychological manipulation. Victoria's composure cracked. What did you do? She hissed. I lifted my phone. A dead man protocol, activated on impact. James looked at me, horror blooming in his eyes. You planned this. I documented this, I corrected. You executed it. Whitley stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His calm vanished. This is highly inappropriate. Project Sentinel, I said, cutting him off. That's what you called it, right? His face drained of color. Several guests turned sharply toward him. The conditioning protocol, I continued. Installed when James was 12, reinforced monthly, activated tonight. Victoria snapped, she's lying. Then explain the payments, I said. $30,000 a month, behavioral maintenance. Phones rose higher. Someone began recording again. James pressed his hands against his temples. I remember pieces, the headaches, the repetition. Victoria grabbed his face. Stop, don't listen. Don't touch him, I said sharply. She did anyway. James recoiled. That was the moment the room shifted. Power left her. Sirens echoed in the distance, not close, but coming. I addressed the guests now, judges, senators, donors. You all witnessed an assault, I said, and the trigger that caused it. Everything else, financial records, surveillance, testimony, is already in federal hands. Someone whispered, FBI. Victoria's voice trembled for the first time. You destroyed us. No, I said, you demonstrated yourselves. James sank into a chair, shaking. I don't know who I am. I looked at him once, just once. That's because they never let you be. Elevator doors opened behind us. Two men in dark suits stepped out. Mrs. Harrington, one said, flashing a badge. We need to speak with you. Victoria turned slowly. Her empire didn't fall with a scream. It collapsed in silence. The laugh had done its work. That was when they stopped seeing me as a victim and started seeing me as a threat. Phones were no longer pointed at James. They were pointed at Victoria, at Whitley, at William, at each other. Every powerful person in that room was suddenly aware of one thing. They were on record. Victoria straightened, forcing control back into her spine. This is a misunderstanding, she said, louder now. A private family matter. No, I said, it's a public demonstration. James looked up at me, eyes glassy, terrified. Why can't I remember deciding anything? Because you never did. Whitley stepped forward, hands raised slightly, voice clinical. James is experiencing dissociation. He needs immediate care. You mean deprogramming, I said. He froze. You trained him to respond to pressure, I continued. Touch, tone, authority, and when it worked, you called it success. Someone in the crowd whispered, Jesus. William pulled Victoria aside, his voice urgent. We need to leave, now. She shook him off, not yet. The mistake was staying. The second wave of alerts hit. More details, more documents, names attached, faces tagged. A senator's wife gasped. A judge stepped back as if distance could erase association. James's breathing became uneven. She used to say I was weak, he murmured, that she was protecting me. Victoria snapped, I was. Her voice was sharp, honest. The room heard it. You didn't protect me, James said, standing unsteadily. You own me. That sentence landed harder than the slap. Whitley's phone rang, he ignored it, then it rang again. This time he answered, listened, his shoulders sagged. They know, he said quietly to Victoria, everything. Sirens grew louder now, close. I addressed the room one final time. Anyone who wants immunity should speak now. Waiting won't help you. That was enough. Alliances shattered instantly. People stepped away from the Harringtons. Conversations fractured. Survival instincts took over. James looked at me. You stayed even knowing. I stayed, I said, to end it. The elevator doors opened again. More agents this time. Victoria didn't scream, she didn't cry. She smiled. "If you think this ends with me," she said softly, "you don't understand power." I smiled back. "If you think power survives daylight," I replied, "you never understood me." Cuffs clicked shut. And for the first time all night, Victoria Harrington had no one whispering in her ear. The moment the cuffs closed, the room exhaled. Not in relief. In calculation. Every person there was measuring distance. From Victoria, from James, from me. From the past 5 years of quiet cooperation, they suddenly wished they could erase. Agents moved fast, phones collected, names taken, statements requested, no shouting, no resistance, just the cold efficiency of a system finally turning on its own. Victoria stood perfectly still as they read her rights. She listened carefully, memorizing every word like ammunition for later. Even now, she believed this was temporary. It wasn't. James sat on the edge of a chair, shaking. He hadn't resisted when an agent gently guided Victoria away from him. That told me everything. The conditioning was breaking. "I don't remember choosing," he said again. "I just obeyed." "That's how they built it," I replied. "Automatic response, no consent required." Whitley was pulled aside next. He tried to recover his professional tone, but his eyes kept darting toward the exits. "You understand, Doctor," an agent said, "that your records are already in our possession." His mouth opened, closed. William Harrington was already negotiating. He always had been good at survival. Outside, police lights reflected off the harbor. Media gathered below. Word had traveled faster than I expected. That was the switch. The moment James's hand struck my face, my phone had triggered a release. Evidence packets, years of them, sent simultaneously to federal agencies, journalists, and secured public servers. Not revenge. Insurance. Victoria's empire wasn't falling because of one slap. It was collapsing because it had finally been seen. An agent approached me. "Mrs. Harrington, are you injured?" "Yes," I said, "and documented." He nodded. "We'll need your statement." "You already have it," I said. "Check your inbox." He almost smiled. James stood slowly, swaying. "I hurt you." "Yes," I said. "I don't know why." "I know," I replied. "That's why this ends tonight." He looked at the harbor, at the flashing lights, at the reality settling around him. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "you remember." Behind us, Victoria turned once as she was escorted away. Her eyes locked onto mine. This wasn't hatred. It was disbelief. She had never considered I would finish the story myself. And as the doors closed behind her, I realized something important. This wasn't the climax. It was the release. By midnight, the Harrington name was poison. Phones kept buzzing, headlines multiplied. Each alert peeled away another layer of protection Victoria had built over decades. Fraud, laundering, coercion, psychological abuse, names attached, dates confirmed. There was no single explosion, just a steady collapse. James sat apart from everyone now, guarded but not restrained. Agents spoke to him gently, carefully. They already knew what he was, not the architect, not the mastermind. "The instrument." "I remember being 12, he said suddenly, staring at the floor. "They told me the sessions were to make me strong." Whitley flinched. "Strong enough to obey," James continued. "Strong enough not to ask why." Victoria lunged toward him. "Stop filling his head with lies." An agent blocked her path. James stood, his hands shook but his voice didn't. "You told me my doubt was sickness." Victoria's mask cracked. It was weakness. That word echoed. Whitley swallowed hard. "I followed instructions," he said. "I didn't design the objectives." "But you enforced them," I said, "for years." Silence followed. William broke it. "We should all be very careful what we say." Too late. An agent read aloud from a document. "Project Sentinel, Behavioral Compliance Protocol. Objective, ensure decision alignment through conditioned response." Whitley closed his eyes. The guests who remained backed farther away, as if distance could absolve them. Some had already left. Others stayed frozen, knowing movement would only draw attention. James turned to me. How long did you know? Long enough, I said. Why didn't you tell me? Because they were listening, I replied, and you weren't ready. That hurt him, but he understood. Victoria laughed sharply. You think this makes you free? She said to him. You don't know how to live without direction. James looked at her, really looked at her. I'm about to find out, he said. That was the moment she lost him. Whitley spoke again, voice breaking. I'll cooperate. William swore under his breath. The agents exchanged looks. They had what they needed. James sat back down, exhausted, stripped raw. The man beside me now was unrecognizable from the one who had raised his hand earlier. And yet more real. As Victoria was led away, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. She still believed she had shaped him too well to break. She was wrong, Victoria didn't beg. That was what made her dangerous. As the agents prepared to escort her away, she straightened her coat and lifted her chin, reclaiming authority through posture alone. Even now, she believed control was a matter of will. This is unnecessary, she said evenly. You're humiliating my family. No, James replied, you already did. The words stopped her. She turned slowly, eyes narrowing as if recalculating. James, you're confused. You've always been confused. I was trained to be, he said. Whitley looked down. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice the way she had done thousands of times before. You needed guidance. Without structure, you would have failed. James shook his head. I would have chosen. That's the same thing, she snapped. The room heard it. That was the slip. You never wanted a son, James said quietly. You wanted compliance. Her control finally fractured. Do you know what this family required to survive? She demanded. Sacrifice, discipline, obedience. Weak people don't inherit power. So you broke me to protect it, he said. She didn't deny it. I shaped you, Victoria said. Everything you are exists because of me. James stepped back. Everything I am exists despite you. That was the end. Agents moved in. Victoria didn't resist. She allowed the cuffs with dignity, but her eyes burned with fury, not fear. She turned to me then. This isn't over, she said softly. You think truth protects you. It does when it's documented, I replied. She smiled thinly. Power adapts. So do survivors. They led her away. James sank into a chair as if the strength had drained from his bones. His hands trembled, but this time it wasn't conditioning. It was release. I don't know what comes next, he said. For the first time, I replied, neither did she. Sirens faded into the distance. Conversations hushed. People began leaving without goodbyes, without eye contact, without the confidence they'd arrived with. The Harrington Empire wasn't roaring anymore. It was bleeding out quietly. And the silence that followed was heavier than the noise had ever been. The rooftop emptied fast. Not panic avoidance. People didn't run, they distanced. Each step away from the Harringtons was a step toward self-preservation. Power never disappeared, it simply changed sides. James remained seated, head bowed, hands clenched. Agents spoke to him gently, explaining things he was barely processing. He nodded without really hearing them. I hurt you, he said again, looking up at me. Yes. There was no accusation in my voice. That unsettled him more than anger would have. I don't know how much of me is real, he whispered. Enough, I said, more than they wanted. William was already gone, slipped away between statements. Survival instinct intact. Others followed soon after, leaving behind half-finished drinks and abandoned conversations. The therapist sat alone now, scribbling notes like confession might still save him. Agents took me aside briefly. Confirmed statements, confirmed releases, confirmed charges pending. This wasn't unraveling. It was done. James stood suddenly unsteady. I need air. An agent nodded and followed at a distance. I watched him go, wondering how much damage could be undone, and how much would remain permanent. The night ended without closure. No apology could reach far enough back. No explanation could erase conditioning years deep. But the control was broken. And that was irreversible. I left alone. For the first time in 5 years, no one followed me home. The silence afterward was louder than the slap. News trucks camped outside the Harrington house by morning. Calls flooded my phone, numbers I didn't recognize, voices pretending concern while searching for leverage. I didn't answer any of them. The house felt different without eyes watching. I knew where the cameras were. I knew when they went dark. That had been part of the deal. James was taken to a private facility before sunrise. Not jail, not freedom, observation, evaluation. The system didn't know what to do with someone who was both evidence and victim. Neither did he. He called once. "I keep remembering things that don't feel like memories," he said, like instructions pretending to be thoughts. "That's normal," I replied. "It means the separation has started." A pause. "Did you ever love me?" I didn't answer immediately. "Yes," I said finally, "before they tightened control, before you stopped choosing." "That makes it worse," he whispered. "I know." The lawyers moved fast, so did the prosecutors. Whitley talked. William disappeared, then resurfaced with counsel and cooperation terms. Victoria remained silent, strategic to the end. Every document I released found its mark. Every recording filled a gap investigators hadn't known existed. Nothing could be taken back. James was no longer my husband by law within weeks. Not a fight, not a negotiation, just signatures and distance. The marriage had served its purpose for everyone involved. Except him. I didn't visit him right away, not because I didn't care, but because clarity required space. I needed to know who he was becoming before deciding who I would be to him. The Harrington name began vanishing from buildings. Donations were frozen, boards resigned, allies pretended they'd never been close. Power rewrites memory quickly. One night, weeks later, James texted. "I remember choosing a book once. She punished me for it." That was the first real memory. And that's when I knew this story wasn't finished. The trial didn't open with drama. It opened with certainty. By the time Victoria Harrington entered the courtroom, the outcome was already leaning in one direction. Not because of public outrage, but because the structure that once protected her had collapsed inward. She looked smaller without influence, not weaker, just contained. James wasn't there. His absence spoke louder than testimony. The prosecution didn't need him yet. They had records, timelines, patterns, years of them. Whitley testified first. Clinical, precise, devastating. He explained the methods as if discussing machinery. Repetition, reinforcement, triggers installed early, strengthened over time, emotional dependency paired with authority. Was the subject aware? The prosecutor asked. No, Whitley said. Awareness would have compromised compliance. The courtroom went still. Victoria didn't react. She stared forward, hands folded, expression neutral. She had trained herself too well to betray emotion. Then the documents came. Payment trails, shell accounts, instruction logs written in Victoria's hand, notes about behavioral correction and response efficiency. No single piece was fatal. Together, they were undeniable. The defense tried doubt, family disagreement, overzealous spouse, misinterpretation. It didn't land. Because patterns don't lie. James's name surfaced repeatedly, not as mastermind, not as beneficiary. As asset. When the prosecutor said it out loud, the defendant used her own son as a controlled proxy. The room shifted. Even seasoned jurors reacted. Victoria finally turned. Not toward the judge. Not toward the jury. Toward me. Her eyes were calm. Calculating. She wasn't angry. She was assessing what I would do next. Because she still believed this wasn't over. And that was her final miscalculation. The trial didn't slow down. It accelerated. Once Whitley spoke, everything else followed. Bank officials, accountants, former executives who had once sworn loyalty and now swore truth. Each testimony locked another door Victoria could no longer open. The money trail was worse than expected. Hundreds of millions, rooted, washed, recycled through charities that existed only on paper. Donations announced publicly, reclaimed privately. The Harrington fortune wasn't just protected, it was weaponized. Then the trust document surfaced. Original versions. Suppressed clauses. Conditions written by James's grandfather that Victoria had buried decades earlier. Ethical operation requirements. Provisions for forfeiture if manipulation or coercion was proven. The courtroom leaned forward as the prosecutor read them aloud. Victoria stiffened. For the first time, something close to panic crossed her face. This wasn't prison she feared. It was loss of control. The trust, everything she had shaped James into, was slipping from her grasp. Assets frozen, boards dissolved, properties marked for seizure. The defense objected, too late. When the judge overruled, the sound echoed like a verdict rehearsed in advance. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. Inside, Victoria sat perfectly still, watching her empire convert into evidence. James watched the proceedings remotely. I knew because he messaged once during a recess. She never wanted me, just the access. I didn't reply. He needed to arrive there alone. When closing arguments ended, the room felt empty despite being full. Everyone already knew. Guilt was no longer theoretical. It was documented. And when the judge announced sentencing would follow within weeks, Victoria finally exhaled, slow, controlled, furious. She still believed she could survive this. She was wrong. By the time sentencing arrived, the Harrington name no longer carried weight. It carried history. Victoria entered the courtroom in restraints. No cameras inside, no allies waiting, just procedure, just consequence. She didn't look at anyone this time. Not me, not the judge, not the empty seat where James should have been. The sentence was long. Long enough to erase relevance. She didn't react when the number was read. Not shock, not denial, only calculation failing to find an exit. That was the moment her power truly ended. Outside the courtroom, life kept moving. It always does. Empires fall quietly once people stop needing them. James chose not to attend. Instead, he checked himself into a long-term recovery program. Not hiding, rebuilding, one memory at a time. He sent messages sometimes, short, unpolished. I chose my own clothes today. I said no, and nothing happened. I'm angry, I think that means it's working. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was learning agency. I didn't return to my old firm. I couldn't. I saw now how systems protect themselves first. Instead, I built something smaller, sharper, focused on cases involving coercion, psychological control, financial manipulation. Clients came quietly at first. Then faster. Stories echoed the same pattern, different families, different institutions, same tactics, same silence. The trust funds were redirected. Restitution began. People Victoria had erased were suddenly seen again. James signed away his inheritance without hesitation. Use it for people like me, he wrote. I never replied. Not because I didn't care, but because the last chapter wasn't about us. It was about what comes after control breaks. The courtroom was quiet when it ended. No applause, no gasps, just the sound of a gavel closing a chapter that had ruled lives for decades. Victoria Harrington was led away without ceremony, without followers, without whispers guiding her steps. She didn't look back. Power never does when it finally understands it has lost. Outside, reporters searched for statements. I gave none. Words weren't needed anymore. Everything that mattered was already on record, signed, sealed, undeniable. James watched the sentencing from a secure room miles away. When it was over, he didn't celebrate. He sat in silence for a long time. Then he sent one message. It's quiet in my head today. That was freedom. Not happiness. Not closure. Quiet. The Harrington Empire dissolved methodically. Accounts frozen. Properties sold. Boards disbanded. People who once smiled beside Victoria now denied knowing her. Influence evaporated faster than money ever could. No dramatic collapse. Just absence. I walked away from the courthouse alone. No guards, no escorts, no cameras following. For the first time in years, no one needed to know where I was going. That mattered. James continued therapy. Slowly, Painfully, truth returned in fragments, choice followed after. He didn't ask me to stay, I didn't offer. Some things survive control. Some things don't. Months later, I passed the rooftop restaurant by the harbor. Different name, different owners, same view, no memory of what had happened there except in the records that could never be erased. I stopped for a moment. Not to remember the slap. But the laughs. The moment power miscalculated. The moment silence broke. The moment control failed. That night wasn't my ending. It was the first time the story finally belonged to me. You have reached the end of the text.